Hey everybody, welcome back to Lettermen Row. I'm Austin Ward, joined by Jeremy Birmingham and Spencer Holbrook, my colleagues at Lettermen Row. It's Rapid Reaction brought to you by Buyers Auto. So the dust has not fully settled on this. We're probably not still fully over the fact that the fall season is canceled, postponed, however the Big Ten wants to phrase it. We're not even 24 hours past that point, but it's still somehow a fluid situation. I just asked Ryan Day. We are reacting to Ryan Day's press conference where he evaluated everything that has happened since that decision yesterday, the team meeting, his meetings with Gene Smith. And Ohio State is not fully closing the door at this point. I'm not trying to get people's hopes up too high, but they are continuing to look into options to, potentially scrimmage, maybe play games against other Big Ten teams. Who knows? They're still trying to kick the tires on that. They've not given up hope. Maybe there is no hope, but out of everything that I heard today, I think that's the most interesting anecdote that Ryan Day dropped, at least in terms of the next couple months.
Yeah, for me, it's simple. Like Ryan Day can say that right now, and I've been the optimist in this circumstance for the last few months. But
we've really traded roles.
Right, he can say that. He can say that today because Kevin Warren and the Big Ten have given them no indication of what's actually happening from here, and that to me is the takeaway from listening to Ryan Day's press conference. Is that here we are on August 12th, and there's still no plan at all. So Ohio State is forced to begin planning on their own to figure out what they can do as a single entity in the Big Ten. And again, I mean, I said it yesterday. I'm not over it. I'm stunned to my core that the Big Ten has continued to be such a shining star of bright failure.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, Berm, when you're talking about, because we know for a fact that they left yesterday without any guidance about what they would do this fall or what a spring schedule would look like. The coaches were not informed of that, and they're left to their own devices. We know that it'll likely be 20-hour work weeks, that Ohio State is making individual plans for every player to develop them. They see some potential bright side if they play in January, play 6 or 7 games, and that Ryan Day specifically said maybe early enrollees would get to play, 2 seasons for 1 next year. Ryan Day has very quickly moved on to try to find solutions, which I think is yet another example of how successful and why he was the right choice for Ohio State to take over for Urban Meyer. But again, Ohio State, Nebraska, Penn State, Michigan, the teams that wanted to make a good faith effort here, they're on their own. If Rutgers isn't going to try, fine. But Ohio State is quickly moving on to this next phase, which is also why, Spencer, they are one of the top 3 programs in America.
It feels to me, and I told Berm this before we got on the call, it feels to me like Ryan Day is on a warpath, and he's ready to do whatever it takes to get this team on the field. He is confident that if they play January to March, he's going to have almost an entirely full roster. He's confident that if they play January to March, he can get these guys their eligibility, their early enrollees, and let them play. He's very confident in what he's doing, but he was very we haven't seen him, I don't think, that angry. Like I felt like a lot of anger come from him, and I think it's directed in the right direction because the incompetence of the conference as far as leadership and communication has been staggering. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that from Ryan Day, and I think that is why he was the choice, because he's such a competitive guy. He's so smart at the way he does it. He's so he has a plan with everything. He's going to have a really good plan, and I feel like Ohio State's going to try and execute.
Well, we've always talked about how cool, calm, and collected that he is as a leader, but we have seen that anger and that competitive edge flash before. In December in Glendale, when another group of officials, literal officials, were incompetent, and that cost him the Fiesta Bowl in the college football playoff and that special team. So now we've seen this, twice in 8.5 months or so, where the fire is peeking through and people are getting a glimpse at the behind-the-scenes leader that Ryan Day really is. It's crazy to think about, Berm, how challenging the circumstances have been for him in the last 2-3 years, with everything from the interim role to dealing with the playoff and that first loss and rebuilding the defensive coaching staff and the Chase Young suspension and rebuilding quarterback room and now this cancellation. I mean, it's hard to really find a comparable situation for him, and he's really handled it well. But this this is obviously the biggest test yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's been one thing after another for Ryan Day since he took over Ohio State. And I think that he's proven that he's up to the task time and time again. And what I think is the best thing that came out of today, and I hope that it's going to continue for Ohio State's sake and for the Big Ten's sake moving forward, is that Ohio State has to realize that it is the big swinging program of the Big Ten. And you have got to come out and be the leader. You have got to be the guy at the forefront of this and saying, we are Ohio State. We should be steering this conference where it goes. Rutgers and Maryland should not be determining the outcome of what happens in a Big Ten season ever. Never, ever, ever, ever. Texas would not allow for Iowa State to determine how the Big 12 season goes. Ohio State should never be playing this role of submissive to Rutgers in any capacity. So if Ohio State wants to, whatever happens here from now till January to March to next September, Ryan Day has to be at the forefront of it for the Big Ten. And he has to be, along with Jim Harbaugh and James Franklin, the leaders of the Big Ten. Not Kevin Warren, not anybody else.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable to look at. I mean, Gene Smith alluded to this yesterday, that everyone knows the history and the tradition of the Big Ten and Ohio State's role in that, and how they've long prided themselves on being in unison and revenue sharing. Well, when there comes to a point where you cannot get along, you cannot financially support Indiana's new facilities if you're not allowed to play. I wrote about that on whatever day it is, Wednesday morning here. If the television contracts and the conference alignment is what is holding up Ohio State from even having a scrimmage this year, then you need to take a long, hard look if that is the situation that is best for you. And I think it feels a little reactionary and hyperbolic to say that the Ohio State no longer needs the Big Ten, but the teams that it actually needs are, you mentioned them, Michigan and Penn State, and maybe Wisconsin. It's a short list that are actually generating revenue and competing at the highest level.
You can add Nebraska and Iowa to that, and you have a 16 conference, maybe. But the reality is, and we talked about this yesterday as we were leaving the parking lot at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, Ohio State has to look out for Ohio State. Okay, they just built 3 brand new huge buildings right next to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for tennis and for wrestling. That who's going to pay for these buildings? Are these ever going to be used? Is it just millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars being wasted? I mean, Ohio State has to look out for Ohio State. If Rutgers and Maryland and Indiana and Illinois can't get their together, move on. They don't need those schools. Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, USC, Clemson, Georgia, those schools are going to become their own entity at some point. So if it has to happen now, do it. Because as we talked about on the reaction yesterday, the fundamental structure of college football is changing. Now is the time to do it. If you're going to be bold, now is the time to be bold.
I think one thing that it might be a little bit of an overreaction when we talk about leaving the Big Ten and all this stuff, but in reality, when you look at the situation, and I think Ryan Day highlighted it without highlighting it, like, again, Ohio State does not need to really, I guess they need to listen contractually to what the Big Ten says, but Ohio State's going to do everything it can to get on the field. And whether the Big Ten tells them they can or not, Ohio State's still going to be attempting to get on the field. Ohio State does not need the Big Ten to tell it whether it has the proper protocols. It's been in the building since June, shut down for 1 week because of cautionary tests, and then got right back to work because Ohio State took care of business. The other Big Ten schools haven't taken care of business, holding Ohio State back. And Ohio State's been paying their bills for almost too long, I would say. So it's going to come to a head at some point. And I think Ryan Day's starting to highlight those challenges of being in the same conference as an Illinois and an Indiana.
Austin wrote about it this morning. It's very simple. There is no TV revenue. TV contracts don't matter. If the Big Ten network isn't playing Big Ten football games, you can take your shared revenue and shove it in a very different direction. Like, it doesn't exist. So who gives a crap about shared revenue if there's no football being played? Like the Ohio State can't be beholden to a contract that is not providing what the contract suggests it's going to provide. I'm not a lawyer.
Well, I wanted to make that clear in my story as well. Like I've not seen the contract that binds teams to the league that Kevin Warren, was threatening Nebraska with yesterday, and to take their money and spread it around to the rest of the league. I don't know how any of that works. I really don't. I've had to just learn what force majeure was this year, and I still don't think I fully understand.
You're terrible at French. Your French is terrible.
Well, that's a big part of my shtick on all these shows, is that I'm doing it on purpose so that we can have a conversation point. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But this is an unprecedented situation. If you have $0 coming in, no sport in the Big Ten anywhere, Ohio State or Rutgers, Indiana, whatever, any 14 team, that all comes from one place, and that is primarily Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, and to some extent Nebraska playing big-time football and having massive fan bases and people who watch their games. The Big Ten Network would not exist without the big three for sure, and it certainly would be a hell of a lot less valuable without Ohio State. So who has the leverage in this conversation? We all know who that is, and it's bizarre to see Rutgers and Northwestern having the same voice. They shouldn't have it. There's a reason.
All right, this isn't the Electoral College. You know what I mean? Like this is business, and that we can pretend all we want that this is about amateurism or public health or public safety. This is about business. Ohio State needs to worry about Ohio State, and what we're seeing in football is changing. It is going to change. So either be the leader of that change or get left behind, because I'm telling you, in whatever way the SEC has to do it, they're going to try their balls off to find a way to play.
And the big thing –
go ahead,
if you want to shut it down, go ahead and shut it down.
Ahead.
But the big thing for me with these TV contracts, we talk about all this stuff. Somebody put a tweet out, Ohio State and Michigan are going to have to meet on a high school field in Toledo. And the instant that was sent out, Joe Klatt's like, well, Gus and I will call the game. If these teams want to play, Fox is not going to care what the Big Ten says about a TV contract. Fox is going to say, okay, we're putting that on TV. So at the end of the day, if these teams want to play, they're going to play. I firmly believe, now that I've heard Ryan Day speak, Gene Smith had me a little pessimistic. If Ryan Day wants to at least scrimmage a game this fall, he's going to do everything he can to make it happen. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from today.
And I think that one reason that idea had been floated to me by people who would be involved in those conversations is that those are Big Ten teams, and that is a Big Ten television contract with Fox. Of course they would have no problem broadcasting that game. They want them to. That's the most valuable inventory they have. They do. That was supposed to lead in when the schedule they released last week the game was supposed to be before the World Series. Fox doesn't want this. Come on. All right. Before the bleep button gets used and before I get Berm going again, I'm going to shut it down for this rapid reaction brought to you by Buyers Auto. We're going to have a lot more, obviously, to come on this, especially if Ryan Day says that this is a fluid situation. We're not going to stop covering Ohio State football anyway, but that's Berm and Spencer Holbrook over there. I'm Austin Ward. This has been Rapid Reaction. Stay with us for full coverage at Lettermen Row.